This is Alicia again, and today I want to talk to you about how our choices matter. And I really feel like the Lord was giving me this to think about how our choices matter. My choices matter. I think in life, a lot of us take for granted the seriousness of the decisions that we make, and how when we make certain choices, how these decisions, they don't just affect us right now. They have the ability to affect us and ripple through our lives, through our lifetimes. And one of the stories that God showed me was the story of Joseph and his brothers, and how the choice for Jacob to, I'm sorry, for his father, yes, for Jacob, I'm sorry, to outwardly and openly favor Joseph, and then have this beautiful, brightly colored robe made for him. How that choice caused his other sons to hate Joseph, and then resulted in him being sold into slavery the first chance they got, and how it resulted in him ending up in Egypt. Now, not only do our choices matter for ourselves, but the choices that we make can also affect our children. And so God has been showing me that, you know, the choices that we make, we must be very, very, very careful when we are making choices. We must seek God's face. We must know His word, because the enemy will often present you with a choice that looks like it's from God, but it is not. And we saw that with Eve in the Bible. The enemy went through Eve for a reason, because she was the lesser vessel. She was a little bit more susceptible to his deceit. And so he came to her and he, messed with her head and had her asking questions that she didn't need to even be thinking about, until the next thing you know, the choice that she makes is to follow the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And then that choice affects everything that happens next. Our choices are not just fly by night, fly by the seat of your pants. Our choices are serious. When we have a choice to, you know, honor God with our bodies and not enter into non-marital relationships, but we do it anyway, those choices affect what happens next. What happens if you get an unexpected pregnancy? Or what happens if that person that was pretending to be your Prince Charming was really a serpent in disguise, who was just presenting you with, this forbidden fruit so he could take everything that God had given you, all your blessings? Our choices really do matter, okay? And sometimes our decision to not believe God can really stunt our growth. He's been working with me on believing Him, because I really want to grow in my faith. I'm always trying to grow, and I'm always trying to seek spiritual growth. And He will tell me to do things, and my flesh, my desire to be entertained, or my desire for whatever it is at this time, I'll have these thoughts in my mind like, oh, it won't matter. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal if, I watch this television show that doesn't honor God. It's not that big of a deal if I listen to this music that doesn't really honor God. And God has shown me that not only does it matter, but those little decisions add up after a while. And one day when you are tempted by the devil, when Satan comes to you and he presents you with this choice, because you've been filling your spirit up with things of the world and not things of God, you tend to lean in a worldly direction. And that's all he needs, is a little bit of a leaning in a world direction to completely steal all of your blessings and cause you to go into bondage from one bad choice. Watching those those teeny bopper shows, and where people are, they have 10 boyfriends and everything's footloose and fancy free, and then you get presented with that same choice and you think that it's okay when it's really not, because that's not what the Bible tells us is okay. And we stunt our growth because we don't believe God when he tells us what's right and what's wrong. So our choices do matter, and if you want to grow, you need to be willing to do the things that God wants you to do. For instance, when Joseph was in Egypt, he chose to honor God by denying Potiphar's wife's advances, by running from her. He did the right thing, okay? It still resulted in him having a negative consequence. He went to prison. And it was not, sometimes making the right choice is not going to be comfortable. But then God used that time in jail to work on his character. In order to save his brothers. Because he had every reason to want to probably, take all of his frustration out on his brothers. But by the time God was done with him, he had forgiven his brothers. He forgave them. And he saved them from starvation. So, doing what God says is not going to always result in a comfortable conclusion or consequence at first. But God has a way of redeeming any situation, and he wants us to honor him with our decisions no matter what the consequence. Okay? So the last thing I wanted to kind of talk about was there is this non-biblical story. This is about the cookie. It's an experiment that people do with little kids where they offer them a cookie, one cookie, and they say, if you can wait, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I'll give you 2 cookies later. And so in this world, we are kind of challenged to do the same thing. Can we deny ourselves now that one pleasure, that those physical immediate pleasures, so that we can later on have the promise of what God has promised us? He wants us to give up the temporal for the future promise, for the things that he has said that he has gotten for us. And people, a lot of times people, they can't make that choice. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult choice to make. But if we want to have spiritual growth, sometimes God is going to ask us to do these things, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and it may result in a bad consequence, like it did Joseph, but at the end of the day, if we believe that God is who he says he is, if we believe that he can do what he says he can do, miracles, he can turn everything around on a dime if we believe him. And we can have major spiritual growth when we get to see that miracle. When we trust in him, and all that suffering and all that travailing, he turns it around. And all of a sudden you have this great blessing, like he did with Joseph, who saved his brothers and was reunited with his family. So our choices matter. I hope that this blesses you. And until next time, signing off.